You're listening to the Quint podcast.
As we close off the year, there's a growing uncertainty over where this pandemic, especially in the wake of a new variant, is headed. COVID cases in India are gradually increasing over the past 10 days, with more than 9,000 cases reported in India over the past 24 hours alone, one of the highest spikes we have seen since the start of this month. Now, there's a gradual upward trend in cases in Delhi and Maharashtra over the past 10 days, which has raised fears of a possible third wave in India. For example, Delhi witnessed an 86% rise in daily COVID cases, with 923 new cases reported on 29 December alone. In Mumbai, another hotspot reported 2,510 total cases, which is reportedly more than the total cases in Kerala. 400 infections were detected in Bengaluru, 540 in Kolkata, and 294 in Chennai on 29 December. And this surge largely stems from the highly mutated Omicron variant, which is more transmissive than earlier variants. But the total cases of Omicron are still below 1,000. However, given that each case of Omicron is only detected after the samples are genome sequenced, which takes about a week to do, there is a possibility that this number is much, much higher. So, for our last episode of 2021, we unpacked the biggest story of the year with the following questions. At what stage of the pandemic are we in? Are we at the brink of a new wave? Joining me today to discuss the state of the pandemic in India is Vaishali Sood, the Quint and Quint Fit's health editor. You're tuned in to The Big Story, the podcast where we dissect the headline making news for you, and I'm your host, Himmat. Welcome back to the podcast. Vishali, it's always good to have you here.
Thanks, Himmat. It's a pleasure talking to you always.
So now we are coming to the end of the year, and the cases so far, at least since October, was seeming like we are in an endemic as such. But in November end, we got this news of a new variant now with Omicron now making entrance in India. And we are also seeing this gradual increase in cases across India as well. Like I mentioned up top in the intro as well, we are seeing cases spike in Delhi, Mumbai, Kolkata, Chennai, and all metros basically. And fingers, of course, are being pointed towards this new variant. So, are we at the verge of a third wave?
Himmat, as I was telling you when we were talking earlier, it's that sense of doom, right? We were having these conversations at the beginning of this year, and we're having the same conversation at the end of this year. And
Yep.
One there was a lot of talk of India having entered the endemic stage of the disease. A high seropositivity rate and vaccination rate as it was going up was beginning to paint a more positive picture of our standing in the pandemic. But as they say, everything is uncertain when it comes to viruses because viruses mutate. And that is what has happened with Omicron, the latest virus of concern. Now, whether this virus of concern will eventually prove to be good news or not is to be seen. But currently, if the question is, are we headed towards a third wave? That's what the data seems to be pointing towards. A COVID tracker at Cambridge has recently pointed to a similar threat, and where they've said that is heading towards, not within weeks but within days, towards an intense but short-lived virus wave, third wave. Now, the word that I'm sort of latching on to is short-lived. And this has also been seen in South Africa, where the experts believe Omicron-led wave peaked in 2 weeks. Since when it started, it's already peaked, and the numbers have begun to go down. And so,
Yeah, 2 weeks is a lot better than the 2.5 months or 3 months almost that we had earlier this year
right,
due to Delta. So it is a little bit promising. That's a better deal, I believe, at least.
right. In fact, there's the South African scientist whose interview I was reading, I think in Washington Post, and So he's made this analogy, and he says if the previous variants caused waves shaped like Kilimanjaro,
Mm-hmm.
Omicron is more like we are scaling the face of Everest. But then the fall is also like coming down the south side of south face of Everest. So the fall is also just as dramatic.
Okay.
So that sort of gives you hope.
Mm-hmm.
Having said all of that, at the end of the day, the number of people we have in India, and our population, and all these factors still make Omicron very much a reason to be worried about, a reason to be concerned about. And what happens is, even if the numbers go up and the initial symptoms are mild, at the end of the day, people who are immunocompromised, people who have health issues, will still face severe disease from any virus, and also then with Omicron. And these people will eventually sort of burden the healthcare systems. And we've seen what happens when healthcare systems get overburdened, as they did during the second brutal wave in India.
Hmm.
So, knowing what we know of what happened to India during the second wave, we just cannot let our guard down. We are, as the data indicates, headed towards a third wave, but let's not make it a repetition of what happened during the second wave, where hospital systems got overburdened, people died waiting in the street, gasping for breath. So let's be very, very cautious. Let's continue to mask up. Let's continue to up our vaccination rate, which has become sluggish over the last few months,
Hmm.
and just stay away from crowded places.
Yeah. Now it's been a month. It's been over a month now, of course, since the Omicron variant was detected first in Botswana, and then it was recognized in South Africa, identified as a new variant in South Africa. What do we know so far? A month into this new variant, what do we know so far about it? We know that's a very mutated variant of
Right.
coronavirus, but what else have we
Right.
known so far after that?
Okay. So, as you said, Omicron was first reported from Africa,
Mm-hmm.
and this was somewhere around mid-November. But, experts say that it possibly jumped into population in mid-October. That
Hmm.
seems to be the possibility. It could be earlier. And concerns were raised when there was a spurt of cases in South Africa. Now, the reason why one is concerned, of course, about Omicron is that it's the most heavily mutated version of the coronavirus found so far.
Hmm.
And what makes it concerning, as you said, is an unusual constellation of mutations. It makes it very different from the other variants that have circulated. There are 32 of these mutations that are in the spike protein. And remember, spike protein is what the vaccines target. And of these, 10 are on the receptor binding domain. That's a part of the virus that makes first contact with our body's cells. Delta had two mutations in this part, and Omicron has 10. So, of course, it raised a lot of concern regarding transmissibility and its immune escaping powers against both vaccination and previous infections.
Hmm.
Now, there's also over the last 1 month, we also have data that seems to indicate, early data that seems to indicate that some of the vaccines will not be as effective in protecting against Omicron. And these include the five-star mRNA vaccines and the
Yeah.
AstraZeneca vaccine that's sold in India as Covishield. But the same studies have also indicated that booster doses, and specifically booster of mRNA vaccines, will greatly increase protection.
Hmm.
And this is irrespective of what your primary dose is. So if you had two shots of Covishield, or you've had two shots of mRNA, a booster shot of mRNA would help you nonetheless.
Hmm.
Now, there's more study, and that is very positive data and very positive information that's been released just yesterday. So, all these studies that I've just quoted you, Himmat, so far have been largely studying the antibody response to Omicron of these vaccines. But a new study seems to indicate that there's another type of protection called the T cell protection,
Hmm.
and scientists believe that T cell protection will continue to protect against severe disease even with Omicron. And this is the latest study that has been published in Nature, and that's really good news because, while your antibody protection may fall, your T cells will continue to protect you against severe disease, and that's precisely what vaccines are meant to do.
Yeah.
They're not meant to prevent infections, they're meant to prevent severe disease. And so this is really good news that's just come out yesterday. And it's a new study that's been published in Nature, and so it sort of seems to bring some amount of hope, as we discover more about Omicron.
Yeah. Now, as you said, with the entrance of Omicron as well, we this discussion on booster doses has triggered worldwide. We are seeing the US and the UK and most European countries as well allowing an administration of a third dose or a booster dose as such. But in India, that debate was a bit sluggish and took months at least for the Union Health Ministry and the panel as well, the advisory panel as well, to come to a decision. And recently, they
Yeah.
came to the conclusion that a third dose, a quote unquote precautionary dose, will be administered to those over the age of 60 with comorbidities and to frontline workers and healthcare workers. And they will be vaccinations will finally also start for uh, those between the ages of 15 and 18 so far. But I want to come to this precautionary dose thing. There's a debate
Right.
now on the efficacy of a third dose of the same vaccine. Like we have had guests on the Quint as well, like Dr. Shahid Jamil, who
Right.
said that the platforms on which of the vaccines which we have in India, which is Covishield or vaccine, they're not the best candidate in terms of a third booster dose. But there are some reports who are saying the opposite. So can you tell us where the debate stands at the moment in terms of this precautionary dose?
Right. Hemant, the debate on booster doses in India is vague, and the reason for that vagueness is lack of data, right? If you haven't studied booster doses of the vaccines that are available in data in India, then how do you make any statement with certainty? Unlike the mRNA vaccines that have been studied and the data has been shared publicly, and then the booster doses have been approved in the US, we have no
Hmm.
study that indicates or that shows that the third booster dose of Covishield or Covaxin will work. There are studies that are ongoing, but in the lack of,
Hmm.
when you're staring at lack of data, you need to come up with terms to justify your booster policy, and hence the term precautionary dose and not booster dose as the world is calling it. Because we don't, as I said repeatedly, we don't have the data to call it a booster dose. Now, and it's not just that we are late to collecting data. We are so late that scientists and recruiters are finding it hard to find people to take part in the studies. Recently, Dr. Gagandeep Kang, in an interview, said that they were not able to recruit enough, or they're finding it difficult to recruit people who've taken 2 doses of Covaxin for a mixed dose regimen study that Christian Medical College Vellore is carrying out. So, in the face of all of this, India has come out with a booster, a precautionary dose policy, as we call it, but we
Hmm.
still don't have a clarity on what this precautionary dose will be.
Hmm.
Whether we're looking at the third dose of the same primary vaccine that we got. Are we looking at
Yeah.
mixed vaccine booster? We don't have that clarity right now. That clarity will emerge, I believe. 10th January is when we'll start rolling out our booster program. The good news, I mean, I don't know if you can call it good news, but the two platforms that do seem to are likely to work well as boosters for Covishield are the two protein vaccines that have just got the approval in India, which is Covax and Corbevax. So, that's where we are. But again, Himmat, those vaccines, have they been studied against Covishield or Covaxin? We don't know that yet. So, while theoretically they should work as good boosters, we don't have data to back it up.
Yeah, there was apparently like a bumper sale on vaccines. We got two new vaccines in India and the approval of an antiviral drug, molnupiravir, on the same day, which was very
Right.
rare when it comes to India's Union Health Ministry as such. So can you tell us more about these two new vaccines, which is Corbevax and Covovax?
So, Himmat, both Covovax and Corbevax are protein subunit vaccines. So, Covovax is being produced in India by Serum Institute. We do know that they have a capacity to produce millions of doses, and they've turned that around, and they've proven that with Covishield. So the approval of Covax is really good news in that sense.
Mhm.
So just to explain it a bit, Covax is a protein subunit vaccine that targets the spike protein of the COVID virus, and essentially to help the body develop immunity against the virus. And it's also a two-dose vaccine. I
Mhm.
think the dosage cap approved in India is 21 days.
Okay.
Unlike other vaccines, it uses a different platform, and it is produced by creating an engineered baculovirus containing a gene for a modified SARS-CoV-2 spike protein. Uh, Earlier vaccine efficacy, this is pre-Omicron days, was seen to be around 90%. Now, we don't know what has changed with this vaccine against Omicron, but that was the last efficacy data that is available, and that's really good data.
Mhm.
Um, Now, to point out to certain problems with this vaccine, there were bridging trials that Serum Institute of India was carrying out in India for this vaccine. Just to remind people, Covax is produced in India by Serum Institute, but has been developed by a US-based biotechnology company called Novavax.
Mhm.
So, these bridging trials were being carried out in India, are being carried out in India, but we don't have that data publicly available with us.
Mhm.
So, that seems to be an issue every time in India, right? Whenever we talk about data, we also talk about lack of it
Yeah.
that is available for public scrutiny. Having said that, Covax seems to be a good vaccine. It seems to be a solid vaccine and will really add to the bouquet of vaccines that India has. And one hopes that this data is, shared very soon with us to bring that sense of, data transparency and awareness amongst the public. And it is also a vaccine that is being tested against children in India. And I think,
Mhm.
if I'm not mistaken, it's being tested in children 5 years and above. So currently in children, only Covaxin has been approved, has been rolled out, although Zydus has also been approved, but Covaxin is the only one that will be given out for 15 to 18-year-olds currently. So
Mhm.
Covax could potentially add to the bouquet of vaccines available to children as we go ahead.
Mhm.
The second vaccine is Corbevax, again, a protein subunit vaccine, similar technology as Covax, similar. Um,
Okay.
and it has been produced by a Hyderabad-based pharmaceutical company called Biological E. And it is India's first indigenously developed RBD protein subunit vaccine. So, that's something to be proud of.
Okay.
Uh, but then again, the question that I bring, the point that you bring you back to with each of the vaccines that we've discussed so far, we don't have publicly available data of its efficacy and how it, what the clinical trial that they've carried out, what the results have been. We don't have that data publicly shared yet.
Okay. So if I'm getting this right, we are at a point in the pandemic and at the end of the year where we have rising cases. We have two new vaccines. We have also a new uh, anti-COVID pill called Molnupiravir,
Right.
and we have booster doses approved. Finally, we have vaccinations going for children, but encompassing all of that, we are still under the shadow of lack of data. So we don't
That's
know
right.
how many cases we have right now of Omicron in India. We don't know
Right.
how effective these vaccines will be, or like when they will be rolled out finally. And yeah, so it's a bittersweet moment. If, would you
Right.
would you say that?
Yeah, I mean, this is not the conversation I want to have with you for the year-end podcast,
Yeah,
Himmat. We didn't want to be talking about
yeah,
Omicron or coronavirus and vaccines. I mean, we should have been talking about vaccines and how well the uptake has been and how everyone's
yeah.
vaccinated and, we're moving towards endemicity and normal life. But that's not the conversation we're having right now. And that's unfortunate. But, the important thing that we need to increase our vaccination rate, and then we also need to have a solid booster program based on good data. And that's what we need to be working towards, and that's what we need to be looking at as we go ahead. We do have now nearly 50% double vaccination rate in India, and the single dose rate is going up slowly. So we need to focus on
Hmm.
getting everybody vaccinated, and that includes at some point children. When the data is available, and the 15 to 18-year-old vaccines are going to roll out within a few days. So we need to get that vaccine into as many people as possible. And we need to continue to take extreme precautions. We need to continue to be very that the pandemic is not behind us. And we need to continue to stay away from public gatherings. And the lessons, the wounds are too raw right now. The second wave wounds have not healed for anyone in India. It was brutal. The amount of loss that we all saw was brutal. So one hopes lessons have been learned, and one is cautious, and this is not the same conversation we're having in 2022.
Of course. Well, that's very well said. And that also brings us to the end of the podcast. And thank you so much, Vaishali, for taking out the time and joining us for the Big Story podcast.
Right. Thank you so much, Hemant.
Okay.
And a Happy New Year to you.
And a Happy New Year to you and to our listeners as well. So if you like listening to this episode, please subscribe to the Big Story podcast for episodic updates. We are available on Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, JioSaavn, and most of the other popular podcast streaming platforms. If you like listening to this episode, please subscribe to The Big Story for episodic updates. We're available on Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, JioSaavn, and most of the other popular podcast streaming platforms. For other podcasts, please log on to the Quint website, and for any feedback, please shoot an email to podcast@thequint.com.
Thanks for listening. Log on to the Quint's website and check out our other podcasts.